Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now in today's video I'm going to be talking once again this balancing post that has caused a huge commotion in the community. This post actually at this point this thread has about 45,000 views, and Kabam still hasn't really kind of cleared up the air. At the very least in the last couple of days we haven't seen any updates on it. However, I have seen quite scary amount of misconceptions and misinformation going around it, and obviously a lot of debate. And that's why, well, first of all, I did want to clear up a couple of things that a lot of people think are going to be happening, but there is no mention of them in this post actually. And the second thing is I want to kind of again go over the pros and cons of this whole balancing thing, because there are obviously potential benefits to be had. There is a reason why Kabam wants to do this, and some of that could, be good if it works out. Lack of faith, however, is one of the bigger issues with it, because this, in my opinion, is not the right time for change like this. And even if it would be the right time, it would still be extremely worrisome, judging by Kabam's past track record. So let's just start with the first things first. The biggest misconception points is that buffs are not going away. This does not mean the end of buff program. In fact, Kabam kind of shot themselves in the foot with this one, and let me explain that. There, I'm going to jump back to this screen. This new balancing cadence means that reworks for older champions will slow, but somewhat will still occur. This is a sentence that they really should have phrased better, because once you read it carefully, lower here in the post says that starting April, 1 second, in April we'll be moving back to our 2 updates per month. We will not guarantee what kind of updates there will be. Now again, here they do not say starting from April or going forwards from April, so it is somewhat unclear whether they mean just April or April and then May, March, May, June, July, and so on and so forth. But that is how it ought to read, that starting month of April we will be getting 2 updates per month. However, there is no guarantee on what type of updates they are going to be. It does not obviously still address the lack of buffs in January, February, and March, with the Psychoman being only value update. But they never explicitly state that, let's say in June, we're not guaranteed 2 buffs. They're stating that in April they're going back to 2 buffs, and it is quite reasonable to assume, until they state otherwise, that they are still likely going to do 2 buffs post that. But that was their first huge mistake with this post in general. It is very vague and very easy to misinterpret. And heck, at this point, I'm starting to doubt myself as well. I might be wrong, and it might not be 2 buffs per month, because, Kabam seems to be playing fast and loose with the numbers when it comes to the champions getting buffed each month. But as of right now, this is not end to the buff program. They slowed it down right now as they are working the details here. And then hopefully, past the point of April, they will be getting back to the 2 buffs per month. Now, the second thing that I have seen a lot of people talk about is older champions that are going to get nerfed. People post, oh, my Hercules is going to get nerfed now my Doom is going to get nerfed and stuff like that. No, they do not say that anywhere in this post. They do not say that they will nerf. They actually specifically say that these balance changes will only affect champions starting from March that get released. So it means that the champions coming out in February, for instance, are not subject to these balance changes, nor are the champions that are currently the most dominant in the game. And it is important to keep in mind. However, that actually can turn out to be kind of like a downside to this whole balancing program. And we're going to discuss that as we're going to go over the pros and cons. So just to remind everybody very quickly, we're just going to summarize that post very quickly. So we have no buffs in February, March, value update Psychoman, 2 buffs starting April with no guarantees of what type of buffs they are going to be. They mention Gamora Storm and the Deadpool X-Force as champions that will receive animation and ability updates in somewhat near future. The second big point, obviously, is that rating system, which, to be honest, is least harmful point to discuss, in my opinion. I kind of feel that, they really want to, they can go and do it. I don't personally think it's a good idea. I don't think it's going to be super helpful for many people, but, it can work out either way. I just don't think how you can objectively quantify champions within such system, because there are far too many variables in terms of mastery setups, synergies, sig levels, so on and so forth. And I think it would be just, well, arguably more confusing than beneficial to top game play. It might be helpful for newer players, but I do think, having watched, several other content creators on this subject, how there are many, many more beneficial things that they could be doing instead, and even the system itself could have been handled, just a lot better. But the description is so vague that in reality we don't know how it's going to work out. And the last, obviously the most controversial bit here, is the 6 months balance program for all new champions, and bigger beta tests, and then the timeline of it. So let's quickly go over the benefits and the downsides. So the potential benefits here are obviously, number one, larger beta program. This balance update will mean that a lot more people have access to beta server, and that is a good thing. It doesn't even have to necessarily be the champion testing. It is going to be the fact that more people have the sandbox environment where they can rank up champions that they're unsure of. They can go and test in Abyss and stuff like that. And that in itself has inherent benefit, even if it doesn't have anything to do with, specific champion testing directly. You can experiment with your account. You can make better decisions if you have access to beta servers. That is a definite benefit. Also, more stable champion editions. And I was struggling how to word it. I wanted to write in like more reasonable, more potent champion editions, because that is the point. Currently, Kabam says they are afraid basically to try out a lot of things, and that's why a lot of champions end up being subpar, because they want to be cautious. They don't want to release, new top tier champions. That can work as a potential benefit if we get more stable champion releases, with the idea that they will be increasing the floor level of the champions that come into the game. As in, let's say they release a Super Scroll. It's clear that Super Scroll sucks. Within 6 months, Super Scroll is going to be playable. And that is a good thing. That means that there will be less Psychoman, Super Scrolls, and, America Chavezes and Purgatories in the game, which is what we all want. The additional point of conflict, which can turn this into a very, very big negative, is that an average new champion is going to be more powerful than most of the currently existing champions in the game upon their release, which will make older champions obsolete, and which will force more people chase the newer champions. But at the same time, that will destroy the current kind of ability of tons of players in the game, because realistically, the people who will be able to acquire these newer and overpowered champions, if they are released overpowered, are the people who are wailing out, obviously, because those are the only people who get the new champions reliably and consistently. And then after 6 months, when they get nerfed, is when everybody else starts getting them. And that is going to create even bigger kind of class of players that stand above everybody else. Because if they release a new OP champion, whales get it. For 6 months, they beat the shit out of everybody in Alliance Quest, Alliance War, solo competitive mode when it comes, and everywhere else. Clear all the content. 6 months later, they nerf it down to being a reasonable champion. And, then everybody else gets it, but can't do the same things that the people who wailed for it could for 6 months. That would kind of give new champions 6 months shelf life. And that is a horrible, potentially game-ending, devastating thing if Kabam does get carried away, throwing caution to the wind. And that could be also a big problem. But if it works in a way that it hires the bottom ceiling of the worst champions that get added, so to speak, and it eliminates America Chavezes and Psychomans and Super Scrolls from the game and brings everybody somewhat higher to the point where they're usable, it can be a beneficial thing. It really can be. It also can bring us more interesting champions, because they can experiment with more different interactions. And the rating system, again, it's as I mentioned, it has a potentially decent rating system for mid-tier to lower-tier players. I don't really see how this rating system will be beneficial for top-tier players. I think there are about 50 different better things to spend time on. And their description of it and reasoning for it, didn't really speak to me. But again, it could be considered as a potential benefit. But now the potential issues or pretty much guaranteed issues. Well, the first one is the buffs. Even though I'm saying that they are likely gonna have the 2 buffs starting April, fact of the matter is that because of all of this shit, we have lost buffs in February, we are losing a buff in March, and we could potentially lose, more buffs in future because of it, if they don't in fact return to, full 2 buffs a month, every month, all the time. Because it does sound by the language in the post that, it is that the buff program is taking the back seat. And buff program is quite virtually the only real successful thing Kabam has got going on right about now in the game. So I think that was the silliest thing ever. I think that was about 30 to 40% of why so much outrage is happening right now. If I was to be Kabam and I wanted to do any of this stuff, I would make sure that I would maintain the amount of buffs, if not even increase the amount of buffs. And then try and push anything in. And that is one of the biggest pain points. They really should not have touched buffs at all. But we can kind of potentially look this over if they in fact go back to 2 buffs a month, every month. However, that already has created quite a lot of controversy. And now the rest of the potential issues is to do with the balancing. The balancing itself has been tried to be forced upon us multiple times in the past. And that is also a very important thing to remember. Kabam does not seem to be able to let go of their ideas. This is the same story that they tried with Gears. This is about 3rd or 4th time they are trying to introduce Gears. They have had several levels of development. I know personally for a fact that they had gear testing going on in like 2016 when they, got some players involved in it, and they immediately kind of shut it down as a horrible idea, and then, they didn't carry out on it. Then they mentioned it before and everybody shut it down as something now. And then now that most of the CCP would be okay with Kabam Mike walking in their bedrooms and taking a dump on their pillow and still defend it, and there are members like that in CCP. There just are, that. Now that a ton of content creators are much more aligned with their affiliation and loyalty to Kabam than they are with the player base, I feel that they have started pushing things that they could not have gotten away with before. That is how we're getting Gears, and that is also, in my opinion, why we are getting this balancing update back in, because they feel that this time they can make it happen without sufficient backlash. And that obviously brings us here where if you are uncertain whether your champion is going to be untouched 6 months down the line, you are a lot less confident when it comes to actually opening your wallet and spending money on it, or even rank up resources on it. And that is not a good place for a gaming company to be. You do want your player base to feel confident. This permanent flux that is going to be happening now with every single champion is inevitably going to create a lot of uncertainty and doubt for players for quite a long period of time, in the best case. Because let's say Kabam does magically somehow get this right, which again, most of us really do not believe that, because of their past record with Namor, comments on Ronin, Invisible Woman, and so on and so forth. They really have made a lot of out there statements, and they really have gotten a lot of things wrong with this thing. But let's assume that this time they magically get it right. It's still going to take at least like a year total from now for players to be somewhat confident that Kabam is not going to be nuking down any champion that they find to be OP, for instance. And that in itself is gonna deter a lot of players from getting overly invested in the game. If you do not believe the choices that you are able to make in the game, you're much less likely to dedicate more time to the game. And the last thing with the potential issue is, again, this 6-month whale window, where whenever Kabam is going to bring out an popular, powerful champion, then now it's much more likely to give a feeling of the situation where if there is a powerful champion, then only the whales will get to play with it whilst it's powerful, and by the time you get it, it's going to be neutered. And if that indeed turns out to be the case, again, that can be potentially devastating, because that will just mean that unless you are actively picking up all the newest champions, you will not be able to compete with the people who have in any way, shape, or form. Currently, when a new champion gets released, it's about 1 out of 10 champions or 1 out of 5 champions who you really, really should get at your earliest convenience. Like, when we look at 2021 champions, there's Hercules, there's Kitty Pryde. Those are like 2 the best ones. If you do not have most of the champions released in 2021, you're probably fine. You're probably able to clear, all the content. Maybe for some fights you'll struggle more, but in general, champions released in 2019 and 2018, are still perfectly viable for the content that is coming out in 2021, 2022. This could change that if Kabam gets too liberal and too experimental and, with power levels of champions that they introduce. And that, again, comes down to a speculation. None of us know for a fact, but it's yet another problem to worry about. But ultimately, what kind of surprised me most is, again, Kabam's reluctance to accept that this is not what people want. They have tried to get this balancing program in the game several times, and not once it has worked well. Not once it has been well received, no matter how they, put it in front of us. And, nobody asked for it to come back besides Kabam, but they just refused to take the hint. But this entire situation, this entire outrage, could have been avoided with 2 very simple things, in my personal opinion. Number one, it is they really should have made sure to carry on buff program as it was with no disruptions or even increase it. That would be requirement number 1. That is where all of this started to go down the rails. If they would not be touching the buff program in any capacity, if we would be getting buffs in January, February, and March, and they would write up a written commitment that, they will not ever decrease the amount of champions that are getting buffed this year, for instance, so on and so forth, a lot more people would be on board with it. But they didn't. And this entire idea of releasing champions, selling them, having people spend money, and then having them beta test, it just does not sit well with me or most of the people who actually, spend the money on the game. Nobody ever is kind of comfortable with the idea, I'm going to pay you, $100 for this item, and 6 months down the line, you can come back to my house, take a look at that item, and you can alter it. Nobody wants that. People want that, security, that permanence. And I actually don't really even see the need for Kabam to be so determined to do double the amount of work, which is kind of the craziest and funniest thing. Where right now, they want to have somebody work on a champion, design it, release it, and then players pay for the option to beta test by having acquired the new champion early. And then, again, change it up, pay somebody to change that champion up, and then, release it the second time, 6 months down the line. I genuinely cannot understand why can't they bring the champion production couple months forward. Let's say if currently Kabam is finished working on a champion 2 months before its release, or a month before its release. Because we all know that Kabam is working on champions, you know, few months ahead. So let's say currently a champion is a finished product, let's say a month before it is set to come into the contest. And that is part of the problem. I do not see a single reason why they cannot bring, you know, the finished champion about 3 to 4 months before he's set to be added to the contest, and then use those 3 to 4 months to open a beta, or how CCP members or whatever else test that champion for 2 to 3 months, give the feedback, change it up, and then release it the first time. It is quite as simple as that. The idea of Kabam potentially releasing unfinished product that they're unsure of, and then charging people for it, and then keeping the right to alter it if it does too well, is a red line. I will never personally be okay with that, and I would never be okay with that in any other way of transaction. I would never purchase a laptop from Carries or PC World with the idea that 6 months down the line, a technician from Carries or PC World can come to my home and either add or remove RAM to it or change the video card if my laptop doesn't perform well enough. You know, there is not a single other area that I can think of in my life where I would be okay with spending money knowing, you know, that they are fighting so hard for the right to alter the product that I'm trying to buy. And the answer to this, again, is very, very simple. They just need to push back kind of like the champion release schedule, give themselves some 3-4 months to run the beta test, to actually test the champions, how CCP members do that, how the same beta that they wanted to have, but just do it prior to the release. There is no need whatsoever to charge people, then beta test it basically, figure out whether those champions are good enough or too good, and then change them. You can do same exact thing before the release, before any money has exchanged hands. And that is kind of like the biggest takeaway here. I do think that there is no reasonable justification for this type of business model. Anyways, let me know what you guys think about this entire situation. And I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about